Okay, so for February 17th, these are the things that we focused on: subassemblies, tab manager and naming, bill of materials, exploded views, drawings, and callouts. So let's get at it. So, first off, in assembly one, we left off with this where we've got our square tubing and our L gusset and stuff. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a full rectangle, but we want to be efficient with our work. So here's what we're going to do is we're going to add another L gusset. So remember that's in the insert, and then you can see the different part studios. So there's your L, excuse me, your L gusset. We'll just add two of them. And so this should be a refresher. Now, the first thing is that when you have an item in your drawing, or sorry, in your assembly, you can click on it and you get the triad manipulator. So with the triad manipulator, we can turn our items. And what we're going to do, if you look at how this is put together, we're going to want to flip this. So what we're going to do is we're going to click this rotation. And when we start rotating, we can then just type, and we'll type 180. Now we've got it flipped. So again, you click on the item, there's the triad manipulator, and you have the arrows to move, and you have these circles to be able to rotate. And there's some other features that we'll go into detail later, but that's what we need for now. So we are going to mount this up here, and I'm just going to drag it into position. The mate connector, or the fasten mate, you want to be very careful. I make this mistake all the time. I click the mate connector when what I want is the fasten mate. So the mate connector allows you to add mates, but when you're trying to fasten, it's a common mistake. So I try to just use the letter M because that's the keyboard shortcut. So the letter M, here we go. I can zoom in, and there it is. And I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to zoom into where I want to do it. And you'll notice that one of the reasons I zoom in is that it's easier to see that you've got the right thing. Sometimes it's hard to click. So I'm making sure that I'm clicking it and I've got the little red, blue, and green triangles oriented in such a way, such a way that my part is where I want it to be. So that part is in the right spot. And that's why I rotated them to begin with, is that it makes it easier to do that. So I'm going to just zoom out, M for mate connector, zoom in to make sure that I'm getting the right spot. So I look at the red, green, and blue from the mate connector, and then I'm going to zoom out, and I'm just making sure I'm going into the right spot. And so that's where using your scroll wheel and practicing zooming in and out is really, really crucial. And doing this, the first couple times you do it, it's really hard. So taking the time to do it multiple times. So I'm going to add my socket head cap screws. So insert standard content, and Anzients, bolts and screws, socket head screws, 1032 inch and a half. Now in class, I just want to show you if you make a mistake. So let's say I picked the wrong length. If I insert them, now there's the wrong length. The easy thing to do is to right click on one of them and replace it. Now, with the replacing, you'll notice that you can select all of them. So I don't want to have to click on each one. I can just select that, go back into my standard content, make sure that I'm dealing with inch and a half, and select. And now I'm going to replace all those half-inch ones with 1.5 inch. And there we go. I'm going to go to the bottom, click the bottom, go back into my insert. Now, if I hadn't clicked the green button, I could just quickly do that without having to go back out. Machine screw nuts, 1032, insert, and green check mark. The other issue that I've seen is people inserting more than once. So you want to just be careful with that. So right click, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide all my mate connectors, and there we go. I now have a half of my rectangle. So down at the bottom, tab manager, Alt T, This is your your tab manager. And the big thing is we're starting to get lots of parts here that we're confused. Like Part Studio 2 is not a descriptive name. So I'm going to just take a few moments and rename them. So that's my square tubing. Okay. And assembly 1, I'm going to rename that. And that is half rectangle. And my last one down here, I'm going to rename that's my gusset. Having names that are descriptive, I used to include whether it was Part Studio or Assembly, but they show what it is, and I can also filter and just see only my Part Studios or only my assemblies. So I I no longer include that because it's an easy thing to view. So there's my part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the plus sign. I'm going to insert a new element down at the bottom, and I'm going to create a new assembly. So here's my new assembly, and I'm going to rename that. This is my rectangle. Now, in my assembly, I'm going to start off by inserting in from my current document, and I can select assembly. So I'm going to insert that half rectangle, green check mark, and you'll notice I'm being very careful. Let me just undo that to show you. So there's the assembly half rectangle. I'm being very careful. I don't want to like position it. I want to make sure that I'm in here in the green check mark. So it's exactly where I expect it to be. So in my instances, I have the entire assembly in this little drop down. So I'm going to open up the drop down and I'm going to right click and fix that first part. And now because everything has fasten mates, nothing is dragged around. And if you do that, if you notice one of your parts off to the side, it's probably in your half rectangle not fastened. And go back to the half rectangle, fasten it where it's supposed to be, and you'll see it in the right position then. So there's my half rectangle. I'm going to insert a second one. And this one, you'll notice I am moving around. And I'm going to select the entire rectangle in the instances and I'm going to rotate it. So I'm going to pick this one and I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. And there we go. Now, we are going to fasten it. And learning how to do the fastening is really, really time consuming. You got to put the time in. So fasten mate M. Now, as I've mentioned before, depending on what I select. So right now, I've got my mouse over this face, and so the triad manipulator, green is up, red is to the right, and blue is pointing out. If I change where my arrow is, you can see I'm at the same point, but my triad manipulator has changed because I'm using the edge instead of the face. And if I use this face instead, you can see it changes again. So really take your time, and this is where zooming in is really crucial. So you want to fasten and you want to look at how that manipulator is pointing. So I'm going to click because how you select it is going to determine how it links together. So with this, you can see that the triad manipulator is the same orientation, so it works like that. I'm just going to undo that because I'm going to demonstrate how not to do it. So if I have it like this and I zoom out, and you'll notice the triad manipulator is different. Look at the orientation. So I have got the actual point done, but the orientation is wrong because I was using the edge instead of the face. And so the triad manipulator is changing or how it's oriented. So blue is out, zoom in, and you can see I'm just taking the time. So using zoom, being methodical, and if you look at it and it's mixed up, don't worry. The other thing that I do want to mention is depending on your computer, sometimes you'll do it and it will preview the part moving, but it won't move everything else. And that can be a little disconcerting. But what's happening is that it wants to make sure it's responsive, um, and the computation power to redraw everything is hard. So what it does is it just redraws that individual part. After you fasten it, you notice that if everything was fastened together, it all locks into place where it's supposed to. So that can be a little confusing. Just be prepared for that, especially if you're working on a Chromebook, because it's just not quite as much computation power. So here's my rectangle. We've got an assembly of subassemblies. We've done our tab naming. So now let's go into our bomb. So over on the right, there's the little icon. There's a series of icons on the right. The bomb table is one of them. And in the bomb table, you can see the bill of materials. This is all the different parts. And if you click on a part, you can see, so there's my side rails. There's two of them. My top rails, there's two of them. My L gussets. And I've got everything named. I've got unique part numbers. Um, Everything's good. Now, there's I've stretched this out so it's easy to see. A couple things. I don't want the description in here, so if I right click, I can remove that column. And I don't want the vendor in here because all I'm concerned about is being able to identify the parts. So here's my material. You'll notice that I didn't set it for the L gusset. I can set it in here instead of having to go into the part studio. So I can go into my Onshape material library, ALU, there is aluminum, green check mark. So I've got everything in my bill of materials, and it's my item, my name, my part number, my quantity, and my material. That's great. I can just close that to hide it. That's my bill of materials. And I'm just going to change my view so that I can see everything a bit better. So the next part is exploded views. And again, on the right, we have different tabs, and one of them is exploded views. So I'm going to just reduce the size of it so I can see everything better. Add exploded view. And what I can do now is I can select items and drag them. So I'm going to start with all of these um, socket head cap screws. So a little trick in the instances, I can filter and I can just type socket, SOCK, and there's all my socket head cap screws. So I'm just clicking and holding down shift so I can quickly select all of them. I didn't show you that in class. That's a really handy trick when you're dealing with lots of items like this. So there's my arrow. I'm just going to click up and I'm going to set that to 5 inches. And if my materials are or my units are inches, I don't even need to type the IN. Um, if I had, I can change my units for every document so I can get things the way I want it. So there's my socket head cap screw. What we're doing is we're creating an exploded view that shows how the parts are put together so that when we've designed something, we create a drawing to explain to somebody else, here's all the parts, here's how to put them together, and they can go from there. So there's the socket head cap screws. These L gussets. So we're going to type in LGUS. There it is. Now, I want to be careful because I only want the top ones. So I'm going to take that one, and you'll notice I'm holding my mouse over and seeing which ones are on the top and ignoring the ones that are on the bottom. So there's my L gussets. I'm going to click that arrow, drag it up, and this one is going to be 3 inches. And you have to play with the values. If you go, oh, I need to change that, you can actually go back in and set it to what you want it to be. So those are all my steps over on the right. So now I'm going to just kind of change the orientation of these. So the arrow is going that way. So I'll just move it 1 inch that direction. Because I'm going backwards in that way, it's going to be -1. All I'm doing here is just trying to show how the different parts are going to go together. That's 1 inch. And that one backwards. And There we go. I still have my L gussets, so I'm going to pick the bottom ones now. And I'm going to drag them down -3 inches. And the last thing I'm going to do, just clear my search, and it's the um, hex machine screw nuts, all of those. And I'm going to bring them down 5 inches. And just like that, I now have a sequence of steps, kind of like you'd see in an IKEA catalog, showing how everything goes together. So just going to click done. And you can see I can go back into my exploded view and see it. And when I click done, I'm just back to my normal view. So exploded views over on the right, really handy to be able to show people how things go together. And now I'm going to do a drawing of this. So with my assembly down on the bottom, I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a drawing of my rectangle assembly. I can also do this in the tab manager, right click and create drawing. Now with the drawing, if you're on a robotics team, you can use the 4152 template. If you're not, Onshape, ANSI, ANSI B inch. And for this one, we're going to do no views. We're going to go over the 4 views later. And when we click OK, it's going to open up our drawing. And here we can select. So we're going to select our isometric view, and we're going to select our explode position. And we're just going to move that right there. Looks good. And I'm just going to turn off my tools. I'm going to hide the tab manager. So there's my thing. Now, you'll notice on my computer, I can see all the tools. Some of these are going to be hidden. So you want to look for the capital A, and there's a little drop down if the rest of those tools are hidden. And there's the BOM. So this one is structured exactly the way I set it up in the assembly. I'm just going to click. And there's my bill of materials. So I can see all the different parts. And the beauty is that I can now click this callout tool. And with the callout tool, I can select an item. So there's the socket head cap screw, and click. And what it does is that it shows you what number the item is, which is that was item number 4. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to select my L gusset. I'm going to select that rail right there, which is item number 1. That rail right there, which is item number 2. And the last item in my bill of materials are my nuts. So there we go. I have my side rail identified, my top rail identified, the L gusset, the socket head cap screw, and the hex machine screw. And this allows me to easily show you. I can print this off and give it to somebody, and they can collect the parts. They know the quantities to get, and they know how they're oriented. That's all the information they need to put it together. So down on the bottom right, you'll notice I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to right click and edit note. Now, so this note, I get this little box here. I'm going to just delete the text that's currently in there and click this drop down, and there's my name. So there's my name. I'm going to now, right below it, right click, and the standard that I use in my class is I always include the name and I include the part number. And you can see the part number's not set. We better fix that right now. So there's the tab manager, rectangle right there, right click, go to properties, and our rectangle, we don't have our part number. So we're going to use this same format. So for the part number, it's your initials, 3 or 4 letters that indicate the project. So this is our February project. Now, this is an assembly, so it's going to be A, and the assembly is going to be 01 and save. And I better do the rectangle one, the half rectangle as well. So it is a subassembly of 01, so I'm going to have 01-01. There we go. Now, it doesn't, the beauty that I really like about the drawings, whoops, I'm clicking all kinds of things, is it doesn't change anything. Um, and that's because if you have a drawing all set up, you don't want it to all of a sudden randomly change. So it will not change until you tell it that you want it updated. So that little yellow circular thing that I clicked updates it, and then there is my part number. So I now have a completed drawing. I can click these three lines. I can click print. If I want to download it as a PDF, when you click print, some of you will get pop-ups blocked depending on your computer settings. And you'll see in the URL bar up here a little red um, icon in the corner, and you click on that and you can click on the link to open up the PDF. So there it is. I think I've covered everything on my checklist, and that is it. Enjoy.